Welcome to the Notable Nonprofit. I'm your host, Katie Roche, and today I'm at the Johnson County Historical Museum. If you've never been here, this is a really great way to get acquainted with the history of Iowa City. I'm here with Leanne Randack, who is the curator of the museum. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
This is a pretty amazing place. There's permanent installations, there's temporary installations, and right now you have a temporary installation on the flood, and I understand that this place really got by the skin of its teeth.
Our parking lot flooded and it came up to about the top step as you come in, and what helped us was the fact that we don't have a basement and it sits pretty high above the ground level. But we were in the thick of things ourselves, trying to protect the items that we have in the building here.
River kind of circles almost U-shapes around this building, and that will kind of help people understand where you're located. You're right by the Coralville Marriott here.
Right, in the Iowa River Landing,
Right.
yeah.
And so some people are familiar with the car museum. Now, is the car museum a part of?
We actually have two separate museums in one building. So the Car Museum is in the same building as we are, the Antique Car Museum of Iowa, but we are two separate organizations. But we have an arrangement that's been working out great, that where we share a building, and so people who visit, their admission gets them into two museums basically for the price of one.
Oh, that's great. And some of your permanent installations here at the museum are really focused on bringing community into helping to actually create the installation.
Yeah, our Community Stories project exhibit was completed about a year ago. That exhibit is focused on looking at a little bit of the history of as many communities in Johnson County as we could. We actually focused on 18 different towns and small towns, communities in Johnson County. And what was just fun about that project, putting it together, rather than having our staff and volunteers specifically go out and research the history of individual communities and create a display, we were able to get together committees of interested people in their own, from the individual communities, to work with us in terms of putting together a history of their community that they wanted to see. And so what we're hoping with that is people will come in, they'll be able to learn a little bit about the history of Swisher or North Liberty or Morse or River Junction, and say, ooh, there's some interesting things there. I'd like to go out and see what that community is like. So that's part of our interest, or part of the goal of that whole exhibit.
This is a great place for someone to bring their kids. There's some really nice interactive aspects to the museum.
Yeah, so we have several different interactive pieces in our Meskwaki and Settlers Land exhibit. Kids can come in, they can go inside our kind of reproduction wiki up, and also a log cabin. So in addition to learning about life for the early settlers, interacting with coffee grinders and wool carders and other pieces. They can also interact in the Meskwaki exhibit with tools that they would have used at the time that the settlers came, European settlers came to Johnson County in the 1830s and 1840s. What were the lives of the Meskwaki like at that time as well?
The printing section here is so interesting. Of course, you know, people associate Iowa City with literature and bookmaking and printing and all of that, but you actually have an active press here at the museum.
Yeah, we have a letterpress and a type cabinet and another piece of furniture that actually came from the Bradley print shop, which was a long-time print shop in Iowa City. People have been around here for a long time will remember it. Started in the 1920s and finally closed, I believe, in 1996. So very long history. And then the letterpress is something that came from the school district but didn't belong to the Bradley print shop. With the help of some people involved with the Center for the Book, make it functional again, and so it can be used, and we have demonstrations and so forth, which is a lot of fun.
One of the items in your back room that's not on display presently, you said it's Irving Weber's crib. And so what's the story there? How did you find out it was his crib?
Well, after Irving Weber's death, when the house his house was, and it was, I believe it was actually after his son's death, when his house was cleaned out and things, and material was gone through, and Mary Bennett with the State Historical Society, who knew him and helped him with research for many, many years, was part of helping sort through stuff, as well as Lolly Eggers, I believe, who wrote his biography. And as they were going through things, his papers, of course, are at the State Historical Society library, but there were also objects that she thought we might be interested in. And one of those, she said, was this cradle. And she said, all I could tell you is that Irving Weber, every time I was at his house or whenever it came up, he said that this was his cradle. And that's the provenance that goes with it. And so when it actually then was transferred to us, we started having a volunteer looking at it, doing some basic cleaning, and been in the basement. Some pieces of cardboard had been laid at the bottom, probably to put something else or store on it. And we pulled those pieces of cardboard out and cleaned it. What we noticed is to one of the bottom slats, there was something tied. With a little ribbon from a candy store in Chicago, actually, from the 1930s. And when we finally carefully opened up, because it had been in this position around this slat for so long, but when we finally carefully opened it up, in this envelope that was tied to the slat was a note signed by Irving's mom, Grace Weber, in 1932, listing all of the family members that had used this cradle going back to the 1870s.
Oh, that just gives me shivers.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I mean, to have that sort of provenance.
That whole, yeah, right. So in some ways,
rare.
Of course, the fact that it's Irving Weber's cradle is, interesting, and now that we know this based on her documentation. But part of the interesting history of the object is what happened after it came here, and that's a lot of times there's a lot of story that goes along with an object that we don't always get to tell in terms of an exhibit because we don't have a lot of space. So it's great. We have backstage tours every so often where we can bring back people into our collections area and things they're interested in or things we have great stories and can kind of tell the whole backstory behind some of the neat objects in the collection.
Yeah, every object is probably worth a wall.
Yeah, exactly.
So how does that work if someone has something, they live in Johnson County and they think that you might find it interesting for the collection? How does that work?
They can contact us, and then what we do is get some information about it initially, what they know about it, any history, and of course the more history that is known about an object, the more that we're likely possibly to want to accept it in our collection. And we do have criteria. We can't collect everything, obviously. We need a lot more space. So we do look at its history, what condition it's in, so we want to see something before we can accept it, and space concerns might be for some larger items, and look at its significance to Johnson County history. Do we have another one of those objects? All those things go into play, and once we've kind of evaluated that, then we can get back to the person and let them know, whether it's something that we're able to accept into the collection. So, but people have all sorts of neat things in their basements and
so
attics.
if they're cleaning out their basement and attic and come across something, they should
give us a call.
Out. Yeah. So when is the museum open? Because I want to make sure that people get out and look at all these wonderful things.
Sure. We're open 6 days a week, Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 5, and on Sunday from noon to 5. And the admission for the museum is $5. Again, that gets you into both the Antique Car Museum and the Johnson County Historical Society Museum.
Well, Leanne, thanks so much for sitting down and talking with me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Community voice. I do what city is. I do what city is. I do what city is. I do what city is.